Hi, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Risk, where our mission is to engage, inspire, and empower the global community of risk practitioners. I'm your host, Naveen Agarwal, and today I'm really excited to welcome my guest, Chris Daly. Chris is a healthcare and life science executive, and currently he is at Iron Line Consulting, focused on providing regulatory and commercialization strategy for diagnostic medical device manufacturers. He's also very involved in AI ML applications and wearables, as well as companion diagnostics. So Chris brings a very diverse business expertise, but also regulatory and commercialization strategic focus. And I'm super excited to talk to him about the outlook for our industry in 2026. But before I get going, I want to welcome all of you. It's great to reconnect with a lot of people here. I see many of you have joined, and I see a lot of familiar faces. So thanks a lot for joining, guys. So, Chris, with that, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Great. Thank you. Thanks for having me, Naveen. I'm excited to have this conversation and glad to be here.
Awesome, Chris. I know our industry is going through a massive transformation, right? I mean, a lot is changing. Technology is changing. There are many regulatory changes. The payment model is changing. Insurance is, a big topic. Industry is under a lot of competitive pressure. So much going on, Chris. Let's try to peel this onion a little bit today. I would like to start by asking you, what is top of mind as you look forward to 2026?
Well, that's why I love your show, Naveen, because let's talk risk. I'm always thinking about risk. So as a principal at Iron Line Consulting, I focus on the business, the commercialization piece. And that's really what we're all looking at. And the specifics of 2026, whether it's AI or the uncertainty/chaos from the government that we're experiencing. All of those things are like the specific risk variables in 2026. But to me, a lot of this is the same old story in terms of, as a history student, we've been in this game for a while. You see, there's always like the next big thing coming that everyone is either excited about or afraid of. It's going to redo our workflow. So as I look forward to the specifics of the year, I like to look back to see we've kind of gone through a lot of these changes with different names in the past. And I think of that like kind of starting 2026 in a hopeful manner. We've all demonstrated the skills to succeed in a variable risk-filled environment, just like we're going to see in 2026. So I think thinking about those capabilities that we all have going forward is really constructive, and how I like to look at it. It's like, what have we done that worked before, and how can we make it work again in 2026?
That's a very interesting perspective, Chris, because I bet when we were entering 2025, I bet we had a same feeling of uncertainty and what's going to happen. And look, we are a year over now. We are into 2026. So your perspective about taking a step back and looking at what we have done recently in order to prepare for what might come at us in the future is a very important one. So from that perspective, let's pick maybe a topic in your mind for 2026 from a regulatory perspective, from a commercialization perspective, that might be important for medical devices. And we may look back in 2025 and a little bit back to see how they might want to respond to it. I think that sounds like a good sort of plan for us today. Chris, so what do you want to share with us as top of mind topic for you in 2026?
Well, I think, there's so many looking forward. I think the AI opportunity and challenge is going to be a major issue. I think looking at CDx, Iron Line, we just put out a blog on some of the new CDx regulations. Again, I think that there are things changing, and the beauty, the challenge is that it's going to be on a daily basis. So we're going to see some things that come out that we just can't really anticipate. But I think definitely how AI impacts us at all levels is going to be important. Whether it's FDA using AI tools, whether we're using AI tools for our submissions, whether we're using AI tools for our devices, that's really the big, not only the big challenge, but the big watchword. And then to add to that, we have the joy of our venture capital friends. They like to follow the next hot topic. So I'll be curious as to whether the money is still going to really be following any idea that's AI, or how they really start to refine differently.
Yeah. And those of us who may not be very familiar with CDx, it's companion diagnostics, right?
Yes,
It goes with very sophisticated, advanced drugs to go as a companion diagnostics for a doctor to decide if that particular drug or treatment will be beneficial for that patient or not. Okay. Having said that, your point about AI is really valid because everyone is talking about AI,
Yeah.
and a lot of money is being poured into AI, and we'll see what happens.
Right. Yes.
So it'll be interesting to see how AI is shaping up the healthcare discussion. I'm sure a lot of people are talking about clinical decision support. They're talking about how reimbursements can be simplified, how the clinical workflow can be simplified. But let's focus on companion diagnostics, be of interest to many people in our audience. These are devices, but they go along with a treatment plan or a treatment decision. And I'm not very familiar with them. So it's a question for me as well. Is there an intersection between AI, ML, and CDx?
Well, sure, there certainly can be. And I think that's part of the challenge. Everybody likes to seek the money. You want to put a AI feature or component in your companion diagnostic. But the challenge there is that then makes it difficult to identify exactly what your companion diagnostic is doing if your algorithm is constantly evolving. And that's where FDA just recently came out with some additional guidance to, at least in theory, simplify that or to sort of standardize it. But a lot of the same principles that you would use in developing your CDx, I think, still apply. And that's part of really starting with a standardized process and really knowing what you're trying to accomplish and using AI, I think, more as a very specific tool. I think that's, in general, what we see is like there's a desire to think about it as it's a new subject matter, a new market, a new thing. But I think that in a regulatory context, but in a business context, the key is to really understand and use it as a very specific tool and what you're actually trying to accomplish for the patient, what you're trying to accomplish for the provider, and then obviously from a business point of view, how that triggers your revenue, and really try to focus in on the specificity of that AI tool. And then, of course, there's a distinction between artificial intelligence and machine learning. As you keep digging in, the specifics become very, very relevant to not just your device, but how you understand and frame the device, both for the FDA, but also for investors and the market at large. So I think that's the key thing, like what is the question and what is the tool?
So it's not like, we are all so excited about AI, and engineers and technical people also have excitement. And it's not like, here's AI, let me figure out how I can use it. But rather, what I'm hearing you say is that what is a specific problem that I can solve with AI or ML that cannot be solved otherwise? And it can provide this very specific functionality benefit, at the same time help us to generate positioning and get more revenue. So we need to start with the problem first, not with the solution. I think that's a key point, right?
Correct. So, and I think with specificity too is going to help you manage your interactions on a regulatory front, because FDA likes to have questions, and when there's a question, they say, here's what we're doing, here's how it's used, then they can process that. So the more you can sort of, which is maybe a little counterintuitive to the promise of AI, but the more you can put it into a discrete package of, this is what we're doing with it, this is the value. So then regulatory folks can say, oh, this is what you're doing with it. We like that. We have these questions, and it sort of can tighten up their engagement with you in that regard.
So Chris, is there a way you can share an example with us to make it a little bit more clear in our minds exactly what you mean by specificity? Just to clarify, you're not talking about diagnostic sensitivity and specificity, right? I want to make that clear with you. You're talking about specificity of the solution that AI is offering. Is that
correct? Yeah. Example of what your algorithm is doing and what is the purpose of the algorithm in the project. So that, again, the key is, which is where the engagement with FDA is always important.
Okay. I got you. So you are basically talking about explainability that we have heard a lot about from our regulatory colleagues, is that explainability of the algorithm is very important for.
Yes.
Is that what we're talking about here?
Yes, that's key. for them
Okay,
to
wonderful.
understand.
Let's put the context around that. The question is why? Why do we care, and to what extent we have to offer explainability? But Chris, let's take a step back. Can we even explain all the time with 100% certainty and confidence the basis for human decisions? That we can't. Right? We can't.
Right,
So,
exactly.
So let's put that in perspective, because I think people are getting a little bit hung up on it. In the end, in my view, I would love to hear your thoughts. In my view, it's all about managing uncertainty and our level of confidence. If we say X equals Y, how sure are we that X is equal to Y? So from explainability, I think we have to decide what level of uncertainty in the output is tolerable. And to me, that relates directly to our core philosophies of risk management, is balancing benefit versus risk. So that's a high level view I have. I mean, can we dig this into a little bit deeper? What do you think, first of all?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, that's sort of in many ways, the essence of science, the essence of business, and in the specific sense, what we're trying to do, whether it's with CDx or any diagnostic tool, is to try to, manage that uncertainty. And I think that's sort of where, as you're engaging with regulatory folks, but in general, like you said, try to put parameters around that risk. We'll never know for sure, but we can kind of give percentages, evidence intervals, range of impacts. And I think that's how, I like to always look at things from that perspective, from the business perspective. And when we engage with clients, that's really the driver of how we try to manage their engagement. What is the risk in terms of the risk to the patient? What is the risk in terms of what the regulatory people might have questions with? But it all kind of boils back to that issue of what is the unknown and how can we try to anticipate it and also mitigate for it. So if something bad does happen, we don't know if it will or not, or we have a probability statement around that. But what do we have anticipate? What mitigations are we anticipating? What would that bad thing be? And then you can do the risk assessment of worst case scenario. This happens,
Yeah. We can apply all of our training and principles, but at the end of the day, I think it's a conversation from the regulatory bodies, and early engagement, as you mentioned before, is so important. I think the question we are trying to answer is not the how, but how much. How much uncertainty is tolerable given the indication for use and intended use that we are going after? How much is tolerable at this point? And what more can be done to stay vigilant in the post-market phase and reduce that uncertainty? So I think this is a very philosophical perspective that we need to kind of understand. Chris, I want to ask you, when you talk to your clients, what is top of mind for them when it comes to AI ML?
Great question. We tend to work with this sort of two camps of our clients. Sometimes if we're engaged with the more technical or the scientific founders, we work with both early stage companies and mid-sized companies, 200 to 500 FTEs, 30 to 50 million annual revenue. So kind of between those two, there are the scientists that are asking specific questions about sort of the clinical facts that they're applying the AI towards. But the business folks, though, are really, they're still focused on business since the Stone Age of what is the revenue implication, what is the fundraising implication. So they're much more interested, I would say, in the marketing of AI versus the technical science of going back to what is the question that's trying to be answered by AI. But I did also want to just go back to one thing that you just said, Naveen, that is really powerful. And I think really the overarching thing as you look at AI and any future technological development is really the human ability to ask questions and ask the right questions. And, I just was looking on LinkedIn earlier. Someone said, well, if you ask AI a question and you phrase it this way, it comes up with a really crazy answer. But if you tweak the question just the right way, it comes up with a very specific and insightful answer. And I think that kind of goes back to not only when you're identifying risk, it's like, what is the risk? Where is the risk? And that ability for us as experienced industry people and bringing our life's experience as human beings to the
Mm-hmm.
people of really asking the right question. And that's kind of an art, but that I think is where we try to drive in and can find the right question to understand the risk mitigation. So asking the right questions to me seems to be from a human risk of engaging with AI and all the science fiction stuff. That's really the key. We ask the right questions, we can use the tool.
I think the challenge, Chris, is that we don't know if the question we are asking is right or wrong in the moment, right? So what we have to do, I think, especially working with AI, and I've been working with ChatGPT, for example, for more than a year now. I've done a lot of work. I understand how it works. I understand where it goes off track. And I understand the basis of it without going into all the, programming aspect of it, which I don't really care about. But the point I'm trying to make is that we wouldn't know if the question is right or wrong unless we are hyper vigilant about what we are hearing back. And that goes into our human conversations also, right? We can be very easily lulled into believing something that is not true because of our own biases. We can reject something that is actually true, again, because of our own biases in human conversations. We can be persuaded, influenced, manipulated. And same is true with AI. I think kind of add to your wonderful insight here is by saying we won't know whether it's right or wrong, so we can prepare, but we can be hyper vigilant about what we are hearing back. And that will protect us from what I've heard about so much conversation about hallucinations, right? People are saying, how can we manage the risk of hallucination with the AI? Well, my answer is test, and don't accept unless you are fairly confident of the level of uncertainty that remains in the analysis. So I just wanted to throw that out. Let's this.
I always learn more just listening to you, Naveen. That's a great insight. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah. And guys, remember, I want to share this with you, all of you in the audience, that we are all part of this conversation. We are not here to teach or do a webinar or a lecture. We are here to connect and have a conversation with each other. So I really encourage you to share your thoughts and opinions and insights Bijan is now sharing with us. We also need to have the knowledge to be able to judge the AI answer. Absolutely, Bijan. That is a perfect way of putting it out there. But I will keep coming back to it. To judge whether an answer is coming from an AI or a human being, the same principle applies. Same principle. AI is no different in that way, except that it is a lot more powerful, a lot more quick, and it can make mistakes. So wonderful thought, Bijan. Thank you for sharing. Guys, I really would like to invite you to talk about what are you thinking ahead for 2020? What is a top topic in your mind? And we can address that in our future conversations as well. But please continue to share in the comments. So Chris, let's go into a couple of more concrete examples. And let's stay focused on AI. You briefly mentioned that FDA has come out with a new guidance around CDx, and you have written a blog about it. Can you tell us a little bit more about their?
Yes, the FDA has taken steps to really address some of the modern landscape for companion diagnostics. So November, they put out a proposed order, and it's to reclassify certain post-amendment class 3 nucleic acid-based test systems indicated for use with corresponding approved oncology therapeutic products. Basically move class 3 devices to class 2 devices.
Okay.
And so, and this is, again, something that's used to typically identify if a patient is eligible for a targeted cancer therapy. So, and those are the, again, higher risk. Class 3s would be higher risk. But they think that because of the evolution and development of the CDx sort of experience of these tests, that there's more general data available, which kind of speaks to AI, but just in general, the scientific endeavor with more data and looking at it, again, through, in this case, human processes. The FDA has seen that there is a lesser widespread or systematic safety concern, so that they're seeing the CDx world in a summary might be a little bit of a less of a risk exposure, so they can look at them as class 2 devices instead of class 3 devices.
Well, that's actually a pretty significant move, is it not? Because I think it should help accelerate the development of more CDx devices.
Well, it should, and I think it can maybe streamline the process. But and that's kind of the idea in theory, is that it would open up opportunities for manufacturers and clinical labs to use a faster engagement process, maybe the 510K for their companion diagnostics, and still keeping FDA very involved in the process. So the safety is still there, but there is less risk. But, again, and I think it will streamline the process, but in terms of the application process, which is one step of the regulatory load. But the first step in terms of the internal capabilities, you still need to have a lot of the components to ensure that. So it's like your engagement with FDA will probably be streamlined and standardized, but a lot of the heavy lifting internally still needs to be done to make sure that all of your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed.
So, Chris, is this down classification applicable to only certain types of companion diagnostic devices, or is it pretty much across the board right now?
I think it's still going to depend on the specific ones, the specific companion diagnostic you're putting forward. So if there's something that's still more cutting edge or innovative, you still will have to go through maybe a de novo process. But it is a step and an evolution, I think, towards finding the process. I mean, one of the challenges, as everybody knows, is like you put together your device and then you have to figure out which way to go with FDA, what are the requirements, how much information you're presenting. And so that's sort of the tip of the iceberg, is to facilitate more of a class 2 consideration of these devices. And then I think as time goes on, but it's kind of evolved towards understanding and simplification of the process for the submission and the specifics of what checklist you have to hit.
Wonderful. This is pretty exciting news to me, and I really like this because it points to a natural evolution and tells us that, hey, there's a rising level of comfort with CDx devices. Now, I want to share this comment with Bijan. It becomes incumbent on the user of the AI CDx to know what data set was used to train the AI, because a specific patient may not be part of the training demographic. That would increase the safety risk of the CDx. Chris, can you speak to that a little bit? It makes a lot of sense to me, but would love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I think that sort of speaks to one of our standard pieces of advice to our clients, is that the client is the expert on their device and their science. So they're really the ones that when we engage, and we want to engage with FDA, it's like for the client to identify where the risk is. And in this case, Bijan's exactly right. You need to understand what your data set is. Again, goes to this source of, as you said, hypervigilance about what the results of the AI output is, but also just kind of awareness of the parameters of the risk of your device. So what could be wrong? And, so what are you looking for, whether it's in your data set or in any context? And that, I think, is really, a lot of times we do not give the appropriate credit to FDA. We've always found them as scientists trying to understand the technology, understand the product, understand the risk, the safety issue, and being very open to you as the developer of the technology to educate them on what are the risks you've studied. Most of the people here have come up with these devices, have spent their lives, their careers working on it. So EA does, I think, have that deference of, well, you're the expert. Tell me where you think the risk is. Tell me what you think the strength of this data set is. Where should the data set be stronger? What did you try to manage? What are you trying to mitigate? And I think that's something that they do well. And it speaks to, again, any process, but it does speak specifically to AI. So those are the kinds of questions that anyone would really need to understand for their own benefit, but understand for the benefit of engaging with FDA too.
Awesome. But I think that is where I also see a huge opportunity for our colleagues in the industry, whether you're in quality, regulatory, or risk management, huge opportunity to become that bridge, translating the technical know-how, the regulatory know-how into a communication package that can help us build that story. Chris, what a wonderful conversation we have had already, and your time flies. We are almost at the end of our 30 minutes. So I'll give you a couple of moments to just reflect on our conversation today and think about 2 or 3 key takeaway points we can share with our audience. In the meantime, I'll share a few announcements. As we all know, the major regulatory change that is happening in our world is the QMSR is going into effect. And based on my recent conversations with people, many people are still not very engaged in that. And we are trying to raise awareness. But at the same time, we're also trying to share a lot of resources and, conversations and content on my Let's Talk Risk platform. We have launched a 90-day readiness action plan for QA/RA leaders, what they should be thinking about from the QMSR perspective. And this goes beyond simple gap assessments and fixing your procedures and templates and forms. This goes beyond that. This goes to really talking about a mindset change from compliance to assurance. And you will hear a lot about that on Let's Talk Risk platform, and I invite you to take advantage of those resources. With that, Chris, I want to invite you to share some closing thoughts with us.
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say, which we didn't talk to as much, but I think it is a key, the nature of alignment of what we do. At Ironline, we focus on really aligning the science and technology with the quality capabilities, with the regulatory strategy, and with the commercial objectives. And I think that's important from a business point of view as we align those things, but that helps us to integrate our offering and identify, but both from the market perspective and from the lab perspective and from the clinic perspective, where that risk exposure is. So I think those aligning of those key components is certainly an important part of how Ironline approaches business, but I think an important consideration of risk that we hadn't really talked so much about. Like everyone has their silo that they have to make sure of, but how the silos integrate and align, I think is an important consideration. And then the last thought that I would have, and I think of this frequently as a student of history, that was one of my things I studied a lot as an undergrad. And I think it's an empowering thought for us moving into a new year as we have collectively done this before. Before it was AI, it was big data 10, 15 years ago. Even the internet, if we can all remember back to when those kinds of things happened. And I was reading over a century ago, many of the large corporations in America used to have people whose jobs titles were VP of electricity or VP of and I just love thinking about that because, again, even back then, they were confronted with major technological change and people thought of them as sort of new topics instead of new tools. And so I would like to refer back to our strength that we have kind of gone through this game before. And I wouldn't want to prognosticate what exactly is going to happen in the next 365 or 358 days. But I definitely know that our past behavior was the best predictor of our future behavior. And in the past, all of us collectively figured this out, did the work around figuring it out, certainly, but figured it out and executed and moved forward to continue what we're all doing here, which is close to our hearts, is to bring innovation to the patient.
Yeah.
I'm kind of excited. It's going to be challenging. It's going to be hard. I'm excited about our industry and our partners figuring out the challenges, figuring out the maze, getting over the hurdles, and really accomplishing the goals of bringing innovation to the patient. And I know we will do that because we have done that every year before.
In the past. What an uplifting message, Chris. And the key point here is we are going to do it together. And that's why I can tell you with confidence, we are going to do a lot of these Let's Talk Risk sessions in 2026 for sure. There's no uncertainty about that. And I want to invite all of you to stay engaged and be a part of this. You are the reason why we do this, and you make this happen so wonderfully every week. Please reach out to me anytime if you have any feedback, comments, suggestions, and also if you would like to come on the show as a guest. It is a very casual conversation. It doesn't take any preparation at all. And just raise your hand and be part of this discussion with us. Chris, thank you again for taking the time to be a part of this conversation today, guys. Thanks again for joining.